Hi everyone, welcome. I see Tom, I see Marie, Georgia. You're welcome to turn on the videos if you'd like to keep it up. Okay, this is Michelle. Uh, Hi, welcome Tim.
Hi.
Can you hear us?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so I'll just do a quick tech check. Listen, we heard. Georgia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Rami.
Hey, good to hear you. Thanks for joining.
Nice to see you, bro.
Yeah. Okay, so thanks for being on time. Let's maybe take a moment to just sit quietly for a moment as other people joining, and we'll start in a minute or two. Michelle, you're going to keep your video off?
I think so, yeah. I'm at work.
Sounds good. So as we're waiting here, possibly more people join. Just take a moment to connect with the breath, where we are finding ourselves having this walk from physical location, whether it's a room or floors. You can see Susan just joining us. Hi, welcome, Susan. Turn on your video or you can put it off, that's fine. And as you're finding yourself settled in a place where you are, you're waiting in a chair, or you're standing up, welcome your feet, just welcoming more people in. It's interesting to connect with our breath coming and this freedom that we have to take something in, take something out. But do we? Breathe. And I'm thinking about that in the context of this call today, working with the business. So just having that in mind, noticing this, so that affecting your body, how's your body feeling? Maybe bring a moment of gratitude for the opportunity to be here, to have the freedom and the privilege to take an hour a day. Maybe other people are doing work in your behalf. Other people taking with family members, maybe children or elderly parents, for you to come and nourish yourself. So let's bring that gratitude to others and yourself.
And then I did like a story.
And try to just imagine, if you don't necessarily know at the moment where the other people are calling from, but right now we have 7 people on the phone. Try to imagine a planet, this round, coming together, elements of life. We're all in different places on this planet. Different countries, different continents, different languages, cultures. We're going to be speaking English most of the call today. So this too is a privilege for those of us who are speaking that natively. But if you are, keep that in mind. Some people here may not speak English as fluent as others. And hold that just with appreciation. Wow. So,
Hello.
so let's take a deep breath and just make sure that we're connected back to the body. And if your eyes are closed, you can open them up and just look at the take everybody. I want to welcome everyone to the call. There's a few people that I have not met yet, so I'd love to just give a few words about the purpose of this call and what we're doing. Then we'll open it up. I'll have some guided questions. I see somebody called in using a phone, 33631406625.
Yeah, that's me. This is Michelle. Yes.
Which Michelle is this?
Yes. Yes. That's my only way to connect right now. So.
That's fine.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
That's great. So we have two Michelles on the call. Okay. So
Okay.
just remembering that. Okay. So thank you, Michelle, for joining. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Matthew, for joining. Zen Peacemakers International is at this moment a culmination of almost 26 years of work that our founder Bernie Glassman put in place in the world, and that takes its legacy from his work at Zen Center of Los Angeles, and that continues the lineage of 2,500 years going all the way back to Shakyamuni Buddha in India. And Bernie's way of putting forward his insight and his teachings of oneness and appreciation of diversity, the creativity of not knowing, the endless bearing witness that there is to do, because our reality is so complex. His way to do that was to do that in the world. And Bernie was an avid meditator, and he was a very strong Zen teacher. And at some point, he took all of that, and he added to that all the work that called to him in the streets, with the homeless, with the poor. At that time, that was the things that really stood up for him. Then that changed into peace building, and he started directing bearing witness retreats in Auschwitz for places of genocide. That grew into more bearing witness retreats in Africa with Native Americans here in the US. Now we have members doing this in different places around the world with this place of deep healing that needs to happen. And Zen Peacemakers International relaunched in 2017 with the international piece in there. We were Zen Peacemakers before that. But we realized that the international is really one of the calls of today. That today we're really asked to address the global nature of the suffering and also the work that is available to us to do. It also opens up, and I think this is really something that we have great strength in, even just by doing this call, is developing this international global connection. And this being on this Zoom call may seem very simple, but the fact that you will soon be checking in with people from different parts of the planet in real time is, for me, a tremendous source of connection and awe. And this is one of the things that I was very grateful for my time working with Bernie, because he would do a lot of these, he would travel a lot, he would teach in many places, and that sense of not overwhelm, of connection, of knowing that this is a universal human condition that I'm dealing with. And all of these things, whether it's climate or racism or all of these things are so universal. They're happening in so many places in their own unique ways. You know, I'm right now speaking from Brooklyn, New York. You know, there's obviously a lot of interest in climate, in race, in discrimination. I have Muslim friends who are, you know, very concerned with how things are moving towards that direction. And I'm thinking, wow, my friends in Bosnia who are Muslim, they're not considered as people of color. They're Muslim and they're blonde and they're blue-eyed. The whole idea of discrimination exists there, but it's different. So this is one of those kinds of insights that we can start gleaning from being an international group. We have an LGBTQ activist from Australia who was telling me that they found it awkward or interesting how, you know, in the United States, for example, there's this usage of the language of coming out of the closet. And in Australia, they don't use that term. They have a different term. And that term is actually colors the whole experience of what in America is called coming out of the closet in a different way. So this is not said in dismissal, it's exactly the opposite. It's having so much space around this and realizing, wow, what I thought was my reality is shared by others and it's shared differently. So there's a lot of insights that we can develop from that. So the long story short, welcome to Zen Peacemakers International. Wonderful to have you here. This call, we do this once a month. We pick up a subject and we just hear each other's experiences of it. If we need to check back in with the three tenets are those principles that I spoke about in the beginning that Bernie put forth: not knowing, bearing witness, taking action. And another call that we're doing once a month is a council call, which is there's no theme to it, and you can just come. It's more of a speaking out of a meditative space. So it's less of a discussion. This would be a bit more conversational. I would encourage us to follow some guidelines that we do have that come from the council practice, but it's wonderful to also practice them here, which are really just speaking from the heart, meaning speaking from our own personal experience. Sometimes we have opinions about things, or maybe we heard stories about things. Let's really take the opportunity to connect with how we feel about things, how our spirit relates to something, how our body relates to it, as our mind. The mind is part of it. When you listen to somebody else, really just listen, be present, notice if something else comes up to you, but let it go and just come back to listening. We are recording this call, so by being on this call, you're giving permission for us to continue in recording this because some people couldn't come, and it would be great to share this. If that's if that doesn't work for you, either just don't participate, or if you want to step out, that's completely fine. And we have 8 people here, and we have about 75 minutes, so that's a good time. We often ask people to be lean, kind of like not a lot of fat on the bone, meaning if you want to share something and you feel it rising in you, that energy rising in you, just take a moment and come to essence and share that. And sometimes the essence is very simple. So that's the framework, and I'll guide us a little bit, and we'll complete at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, so that's in about 75 minutes. So before I even I'll introduce the subject, prison work. We've had a lot of interest in this. We have people on this call, and some people who couldn't be on the call, who are functioning as volunteers, as chaplains, taking the service of serving and supporting people's awakening in the most restrictive ways in prisons, where it's physical restriction, it's mental, psychological isolation. There's isolation from family, from friends, from society. Some of us, I don't know, but it could be that somebody on the call has been in prison and we had participated in or started their practice there. Uh, so that's also an experience that is open for this call. If you haven't had any experience working with prisons, that's fine too. We can both listen, experience, and share what brought us to the call. Regardless, we can also reflect on what does that mean to us in a broader way, and what are the prisons for us for today. So in a way, the main idea was to kind of like huddle team, the members in Zen Peacemakers who are interested in prison work, and you can see that that's can be interpreted very wide. So I've spoken much. I would love at this point to just give a time for a round and just maybe do a quick introduction, say your name, where you're calling from. Maybe give us a little sense of where you are on the planet, and then just say a word of what brought you to the call today, and we'll continue from there. And the way we'll do it is I'm going to mute and unmute everyone as you get your turn. But as you introduce yourself, when you finish, if you can just name the other person. And that way I don't need to do that, and you can help me facilitate. And I'll unmute them. And the person on the phone, if you cannot see the video, both of the people on the phones are named Michelle. So we'll just manage that somehow. So Matthew, would you like to just say hello and introduce yourself?
Hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, thank you for that introduction. So yeah, my name is Matthew Epperson, and I am physically based in St. Petersburg, Florida. So I'm on the Gulf Coast. We were mostly, didn't get hit actually by the recent hurricane, but obviously very concerned about the Bahamas and being not too far from that and trying to work on some relief work there a little bit. So physically, that's where I am. I grew up in Tampa, Florida. I've also spent a lot of time in Georgia, so I've been in the southeastern United States most of my life. I'm very involved in my work with cooperatives. Cooperative businesses specifically is a lot of my passion and my day-to-day work. But my spiritual tradition is Zen, and it was through, when I lived in Georgia, I had a Zen group there called the Athens Zen Group, and my practice leader introduced me to Bernie Glassman's work. And it was there that I first read Bearing Witness. And ever since reading that book, I've been just very motivated to try to maybe share practice in you might say unconventional. The way that I think Bernie approached practice is very inspirational to me. And so this is my first call. I'm very excited to learn more about the Zen Peacemakers and to learn more about this topic specifically. I do not have direct experience with prison work, but live in obviously a very carceral state is often, and I think would be benefited by having more Zen meditation practice immersed into it. So I'm very interested in this topic and grateful to learn from you all. And thank you for the introduction, or a chance to introduce. And so I should then name the next person, is that right? Okay, I will choose Georgia.
Georgia or Georgia in German. I'm based in Germany. I live near Düsseldorf in West Germany. And I became a member of the Zen Peacemakers in 2010 when I joined the first Auschwitz retreat. And I then went there 4 times or 5, I'm not sure. And the last few years I was less involved because my mother fell ill and died. So this is now getting back, so to say, connecting with the Zen Peacemakers. And I was involved in prison work as a volunteer for a couple of years. So I'm very interested in the topic. Yeah, and I would name one Michelle. I don't know, I only see one Michelle. So, yeah.
Michel Dubois.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, let me. I'm sorry, I can't make the Zoom work on my computer, nor on my earphone, nor on my computer. But so I cannot get to see you. I've been a peacemaker since I think '96, the first Auschwitz retreat, and I'm a successor of Bernie, and I've been a prison chaplain for 7 years in France. So I'd be happy to share my experience and the experience of others. I will have to leave, unfortunately, the meeting in about 40 minutes. I'm a chaplain in a very difficult prison, very well known in France for the horrendous conditions in which prisoners are kept, and the very harsh discipline. It's called Fresnes. It's about 15 kilometers outside of the Paris city limit, and I have groups of prisoners that are mostly Muslims, and it works very well. The way I'm teaching meditation, and I also teach, the other part of Buddhism, which ethics and wisdom. And I don't know, I'm surprised, but somewhat it works. And I also have initiated a council circle group with my colleagues, mostly the Muslims and the Christian chaplains attend every time, and we have developed a very sweet relationship. It's an important part of my work, because there's a lot of trust between us. And since the work is difficult, it's a blessing to be able to work, to have this brotherly relationship with other chaplains. Really, it's a real blessing. So I feel I'm in my way, I'm continuing Bernie's work in the shadow, which prison is a big representation, and also is interreligious work on a very concrete basis. And that's about. That's all I.
Wonderful, Michel. I'm so glad that you're on the call, and I would love to maybe call on you in a bit later to talk more before you need to leave, because I think your experience is just very good. Let's just continue with the introductions, and then we can continue. And I'll just call on Michel Dobbs.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michel Dobbs. Obviously, I'm the Michel without the accent. And I'm a Zen peacemaker priest. I'm a teacher. My teacher was Bernie's first Dharma heir, Peter Mathewson, and I also received transmission from Bernie, or Inca from Bernie. I've been working in prisons for about 8 years. I volunteer. I go in once a week and work with a group of minors who are incarcerated here where I live, which is the end of Long Island, Suffolk County, New York. It's a non-denominational program, and so it's not Buddhist per se. It's just mindfulness and meditation. And I also work full time in a cookie factory, and so I'm here making cookies today, buying butter and chocolate. So, but I'm happy to be here, touched to hear you all and see you all, and grateful. Thank you.
Michelle, can you see people's names? Do you want to name someone?
Oh yeah, sure. Tim.
Hi, my name's Tim McCormick. I'm talking to you from Baltimore, Maryland. For those not in the U.S., that's about 30 miles north of Washington, D.C. I am a member, I sit in Thich Nhat Hanh's Plum Village tradition, been a member of the Order of Interbeing since 2015. And since 2015, we've had a community of incarcerated women and men in Maryland prisons and outside volunteers that come together weekly for sitting, walking meditation, to share a lesson and some Dharma sharing. We meet weekly in 3 different prisons. Maryland has 1 women's prison, which is a very harsh place to be because there's only 1 prison. Everyone is subjected to maximum security restrictions, even if you've been sentenced for only a year, perhaps for marijuana possession. We also sit in a men's medium security prison and in a men's minimum security prison. We've got 16 outside volunteers now, and we go into the prisons on a rotating basis. Usually about 3 people from the outside go in, and depending on which institution we're in, we meet with anywhere from 6 to, in the minimum security, we get 20, 25 men coming every week for sitting and walking meditation. We try to offer a program that mimics as much as possible what a Plum Village gathering would be outside, so that we're coming together truly as a community. Oh, and the only person I can see that hasn't spoken is Lisa Marie, because I'm on my iPad and I've got a very limited number of names that I can see. So Lisa Marie, I'll pass it to you.
Morning, everybody from Colorado, which is out west on Turtle Island, known as North America. My civilian name is Lisa Marie, and my Dharma name is Luminous Dana of the Heart in Thai's tradition. And I am also a Zen peacemaker and a practitioner in the White Plum lineage of Thai Zen Maizumi. And I'm on this call because of a few things. I have Dharma family who serve, including Michelle Dubois. It's lovely to hear your voice, Michelle. And a Dharma sister in Pennsylvania who works in a women's prison offering meditation. And then here in Denver, at the Denver Zen Center, a peacemaker named Bob Knott introduced me to the woman who organizes the prison work here in Colorado. I'm on a waiting list to be trained. It's very difficult to get into prison work. And my folks are in the 12-step program, and they work in a high security prison offering AA meetings. I have been fascinated with Nelson Mandela from a very young age, and had been to South Africa twice now. And in Johannesburg, they have a museum called the Apartheid Museum. And I learned a lot more about Nelson Mandela than I knew. I didn't realize that he was very violent and angry and threatening to kill. And he was placed in prison for so many years. And he came out a Buddha. This possibility of waking up, being incarcerated. I mean, we're incarcerated in our bodies, we're incarcerated in our society structures in various ways. So I've just been really fascinated with that possibility of bringing meditation. I play the Native American flutes and the transverse flutes, and the contact here in Denver has found interest in me bringing those instruments into the Zen meditation, into the prisons. So I'm interested in learning more about what people who are actually working in the prisons are doing. And when it's time to share, I also want to share another angle from my experience being on the outside, being accosted by people who are now in prison. So for now, I will call on Susan.
Can you hear me now? Okay. So my name is Susan, or Myoyu, and I'm actually a Dharma sister of Bernie. I'm a successor of Maizumi Roshi in the Zen tradition. And I became interested in prison work because I read the book, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, and started doing social justice work, advocating for things such as the Unlock the Vote, to allow people to vote immediately after they get out of prison instead of waiting until they're off supervision, which can be years and years later. And then through that, somehow I end up at a youth prison. To hear more from you, Michelle Dobbs. It sounds like you work with youth also. This youth prison is currently in Wisconsin. I'm sorry, I forgot to say I'm in Monroe, Wisconsin, which is near Madison, Wisconsin. Anyway, this youth prison is currently being sued by the ACLU for mistreatment of the youth in the prison. However, I worked with the Wisconsin Prison Mindfulness Initiative. We just ran a program of mindfulness for the youth and worked really well in tandem with the psychology staff there. And I'm still learning about understanding how to work with trauma and people with trauma background in mindfulness. And then the other thing that I do is I work with a Baptist minister in Beloit, Wisconsin, who's starting a program for people who are getting out of incarceration, because as you know, that's a really tough situation. And I go in once a week and work with whoever comes to his group that week, and we do mindfulness and we talk about related things. So that's ongoing, and I hope to do more work at more youth prisons. What the one last thing I wanted to say about it that was really great was that we taught the boys as one, well, some of the boys, I mean, because there are a lot of boys there. We taught the girls as another group, and then we taught the whole academic staff. That was that, you know, because these are high school kids, they're taking classes. So we taught the whole academic staff. And then eventually that program is going to offer a mindfulness for the youth counselors who are the correctional officers as well. We just didn't have time in the schedule to put them in. So the prison is really trying to change their whole, the whole feeling at the prison, the whole attitude of the prison. So anyway, so thank you. And it looks like, I think that's everybody. So back to Rami.
Thank you. How are you? Oh, and I see Michelle joined us on video. Great. We have a window into France right now. Oh, wonderful. Great. So I'm just taking a moment just to take in all of the different experiences, everything that people shared here. Um, so I would love just to remind us again, because we're looking at all of this through an international, global, cross-cultural prism. This is also part of the practice that we're doing. Even by a call about prison, this is part of it. I would just want to remind us all that we're using English, which may be a second or third language to other people. So just remember that. Some people appreciate us speaking slower. And because also, I see Lisa Marie has her hand, 1 second. Also because I think most of us are representing the US, I may call on our European friends a little bit more often. Can you hear me now? Did you not hear anything that I said before? Okay. Thank you. Two of the things that we are working with from developing this international cross-cultural experience in these calls, even if they're on the subject of prison, is first of all, it is they're cross-cultural. We're relying on technology, so that's why this is. It's important to just know that that's part of the limitations. I'm just acknowledging that some of us are not speaking English as a first language, and it's. I just encourage everybody to speak slower when we speak English, to those of us who are not formal native English speakers. And also because we have, I think, a majority of American-based participants, I may call on our European ones a bit more often just to have a better representation. So just wanted to put that out. And I also want to acknowledge that one of the things that I appreciated from Bernie that he passed on to me and really all of us is that he was really, really proud and grateful for everybody who followed his work, and particularly his successors, because he really saw how they brought his vision into the world in terms of 3 tenets, the activism based on not knowing and bearing witness. And so it's a real privilege. I'm saying this as a real privilege to be with Susan, with Michelle, and the other Michelle, to have a little glimpse into your experience also. And also wonder if there's some collective wisdom here about Bernie's teachings that may be really relevant to this subject that maybe some of us have not had opportunity to hear Bernie speak about. So again, it's just a reason to be grateful for that. So I'm thinking, taking in things that I've heard, and I've heard interesting things. I think I heard both Michelle and Susan and Tim, and also I think Michel Dubois mentioned how the prison is such a a space of intersections, right? People are not just prisoners. They're also, of course, people, but there are men or women. And Tim says that he's, he works with women who are sitting in a maximum security facility for men because that's what there is. That's what exists. And I'm hearing Michelle working with people who identify as Muslims. I have no idea if anybody what's the experience of somebody who is, a trans person anywhere on the spectrum. So I'm curious, how's that showing up in your work? If that's showing up in the challenges that the people that you work with, that the people that you serve. There's a lot of talk in Buddhism, right, about emptiness and no self, and it's very easy to just kind of disown all of these pieces that really make us us. And in a way, prisons are like the ultimate place that does that. And I wonder if there's just any stories from your experience of connections, like stories of celebration, where you really were able to like touch a person's heart, or you saw somebody bloom within the prison. I think stories would be really interesting to hear if anybody had one. And I would also remind that silence is the base of these calls. It's really fine to go back into silence. And we may want to just close our eyes a bit. And if you have something else you'd like to share that comes out of this silence, raise your hand. And or Michelle Dobbs, I'm just going to unmute you because I can't see you. So if you want to say something, jump in. Yeah. Tim, are you? Okay.
Yeah, I think one thing that has struck me throughout this experience, I'm constantly surprised by things, but in prison, at least in the US, people are stripped really of everything. They have to wear the same clothes, dress the same. And what surprised me, especially going into the men's prison, where these men, they've often committed very violent crimes. They have, we sentence people in America for very, very long periods of time. But I've been quickly struck by the compassion they have for one another. And, the effort that they, even though they have nothing, they'll give from that nothingness to the next person. That the men that have been there a long time, watching out for the younger men, trying to explain to them how to navigate through a sentence. The younger men being careful to show respect for the men that have been there a long time. And this constant, if someone needs something, we're given books by Parallax Press that we can take into the prison. And I don't think a week goes by that someone won't say, there's somebody I know who's not ready to come here, but can I take a book and give it to him? And I'm always touched that, people that have nothing, and when we're reduced to that level, they still want to reach out and help one another.
Thank you, Tim. Georgia.
Yes. You said that share big stories or experiences, I can say that I was a volunteer for a couple of years for the Catholic Prison Society in Düsseldorf, because they were based in my neighborhood. So I got to meet them at events, etc. And I became a volunteer. And we did one-to-one visits. We at a prisoner. Then I saw 2 or 3 prisoners for a couple of years, and to them it was already a big thing that somebody came, because some of them had nobody outside, no contact, no family, or family not wanting to come anymore. One was from Bosnia, even having lived in Germany for a couple of years as a refugee after the war in Bosnia. And he had no family in Germany visiting. So to each one of these prisoners, it was a big deal that someone from the outside came to tell stories from the outside, and that it was men, all were men, and that they could share of their life. And in Germany, prison life is very restricted, and unfortunately funds are getting less, and the prison in Düsseldorf moved to a different place, so a lot of money went into the new buildings and premises, and not for activities for prisoners. So to them it was a big thing that I came along, talking to them for 2 hours, although it might seem a little, very tiny little thing, but it really made a difference to them for their day, and they could share about their problems, and I was able to help with very daily life things, which made a big difference as well. For example, the storage of furniture, because one of the prisoners, he had to move his things because his landlord wanted the flat back, so he didn't know where to put his belongings and things like that. So all this, although it was 2 hours per week or like this, but I felt that this contact with me and was a big difference. And for me, to kind of befriend a prisoner, it was special to me, which stays in my heart, because for usual people, a prison is very much outside their usual lives. And now there's this tendency in Germany to move prisons to the very outside skirts, how do you say, periphery, really to the periphery. And unfortunately, that was the reason I had to leave, because I couldn't get to the new place anymore. I had moved to another place, and from my current place, I couldn't get there anymore. That it would have meant 2 hours one way. So, and it was a big loss for me, but also for the Catholic Prison Society, because they couldn't fund me a taxi ride, So unfortunately, there's this tendency in Germany to move prisons to the peripheries, and other random problems, homeless people and such like. And that's a big loss for me, that I can't do this work anymore at the moment. I hope when I want to move to another place, then I hope to rejoin this kind of voluntary work. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia. Susan, please.
Georgia, I really appreciate what you said, because I see with the kids, this prison that I was working at also is very far from where they live, and their parents can't get there a lot. And something that I really feel so grateful to Bernie for helping me become better at is the whole idea of just bearing witness of to someone's sorrow. And I'm thinking of a conversation. We just had a simple exercise where the person would share their highs and lows for the week, and then the other person would share back to them. This was done in pairs, what they had said. And this one youth shared how hard it was to be away from his sisters and his mom, and he's in there for a while, you know, and I think he'll probably go to an adult prison after this. And but what I really noticed is when I just repeated back to him what he said to me, he clearly really appreciated just being heard, you know. And the simple fact of someone saying back what you said, you know, oh, they heard me, they were listening, and there was a real heart connection as well as the words. And so I think our being able to come in and really hear and be with and learn from the people in prison means a lot to them and to us, and it brings something that they're really wanting, which is connection. Because some of the youth also talked about trust as being very, very difficult. You don't know who you can really trust and who you can really share your feelings with. There was a lot of talk about that. And so visitors coming in whom they can trust feels very good to them, it sounded. And I'm sorry, Georgia, that you weren't able to continue going to that place. I feel that's such a loss for them and for you.
Thank you, Susan. The word that stayed with me from what you shared was the trust and bearing witness. And there's a connection there. Somehow, or I'm asking, is there a connection between bearing witness that develops, and in a way the after effect of that is trust, because somebody bore witness to me? And I think that's how I usually come to it. And I'm curious if that's other people's experience, and also if this is part of the skills that you have as somebody who's working in those environments, to develop that. I know Michelle Dubois has only about 5 minutes, right? I would love to hear if you have any thoughts about this or anything else.
I see a lot of self-hatred in prison, and as other people, also a lot of appreciation for us, for me coming to prison. In France, it's a little special. In the prison I go to, the chaplains have the keys to the cells. So we go and visit people. We go and visit people in their cells, and when we do so, it's people are very happy. It's like suddenly they're able to offer hospitality. So they will give you cookies or things that they cook themselves, or share coffee, or whatever. Suddenly there is a function where they are seen as human beings, and we are being human together. So we are being humanizing one another. So there's a great richness in that, and I've really, in the past few years, I had really two focus in the groups, in the meditation groups I have twice a week, and both of them are now complete. I cannot have more than 20 people, and I don't want to. The ideal for me is to have about 12 or something. Otherwise, it's if somebody is distracted, then it makes things more difficult. But the two focus are really. I'm using the sutra of attention to the breath, the Anapanasati Sutra. I think it's feeling one's breath as the very life itself, and really paying attention to the breath. The prison is extraordinarily, an extraordinarily noisy place. So I do a lot of guided meditation. And the other aspect I'm really focusing on is also, I don't use the term Buddha nature because most people I'm working with are not Buddhist, but I'm inviting everyone to connect with the intimate, with the sacred place that within themselves, the intrinsic perfection, that we can connect by. And I've experiencing the breath. I ask people to experience the center of the chest, to feel their heart. I know for myself that focusing too much on the belly, as we do in Zen, is a way not to experience one's own emotions or one's own sadness or whatever. We just jump over the emotion that we don't want to feel, which is what I did for quite a while. So, and I was also discovering that if we breathe, experiencing our heart, is much more, we can be judging oneself or judging others or comparing ourselves with others. It's much more tender, and we are much more present. So anyway, the Anapanasati Sutra, the Sutra of attention to the breath, brings up joy, which I think it's a very important aspect. I found that it was important for me to be joyful, to be able to receive the sadness of the person, but to bring joy in the self, to bring joy in the meditation room, with all the noise, it's a constant mental storm also, but the joy is really, it's a very important aspect of our work, to be able to really bring joy. I'm delighted to see some of you. I haven't seen you in years.
Thank you, Michel. Thank you so much. Will you be leaving us?
Yes, I'm going to leave. We have a session starting. When I took the appointment, I didn't realize that. But thank you for putting this meeting together. Forgive me.
Thanks so much,
Je
Michel.
t'aime, mon frère.
Okay, take care.
So hearing Michel's joy in the breath, I'm connecting back to that. I'm also seeing wind picking up outside. So taking that in. I'm wondering if there are any specific threads that came up from Susan's or Georgia's or Michel's. You'd like to relate or respond to this summary. Yeah.
I was also inspired by the stories of Johnny Cash. Speaking of bringing joy into prisons, as a musician, I've been inspired to bring music to hospice and nursing homes and places where vibration creates a sense of joy. It does breathe life into the heart in a way through the heart ear, and Johnny Cash is somebody who inspired me to want to work in prisons. I've also, it's such a complex thing. I myself have been held up by gunpoint. My house was robbed violently, and my instruments were stolen. And my piccolo belonged to my mentor. I got it when he died. So there's a whole beauty behind that. And I relate a lot of the work that I do to the teachings of Zen, of Buddha, of Zen, of Bernie Glassman, to bear witness to our lives, to not know, to not judge, to know how to take action. And I really resonate with Michel Dubois' sense of breathing into the heart and to bring joy into what we're doing. A lot of our prison systems are so harsh. I have seen programs on Scandinavian prison systems where the prisoners aren't kept in a communal, harsh environment. Some of them are allowed, like hardened criminals who have murdered people, are allowed to work with horses who would have otherwise been put down, retired horses. And I just feel within the system that we are, each one of us have to work in wherever we are in the world to be able to bring our soul craft, our gifts, our understanding of nothing but nothing belongs to us, that anything that is given to us can and will be taken away eventually. I learned a lot from my experiences. I had a gun pointed at my chest, and I was fully present with the young man who was trying to get drug money, is what we think. But I was right there with him, locked in eye contact, had my coat open, let him search me, had a gun right to my heart, and I wasn't afraid. I felt like this deep connection to this being. And I don't even know where he is today. There were 3 boys who did this. And I always wonder, like, when thieves that go in and break into houses, like mine was broken into, what compels a being to make their livelihood out of that? It's so complex, our whole social system, how it's set up, and how we need people to go into hospice, to go into the prisons, to deal with the deep grief, because it's so complex. This sense of what Michel said about him noticing that the prisoners have a deep sense of self-hatred, just really hits my heart hard, because we only do to others what we do to ourselves, and vice versa. We do to ourselves what we do to others. And as a Zen peacemaker and an earth holder, learning how to hold all of this with gentleness and compassion, and the not knowing, because how can we possibly know the complex web of each one of our lives? My life is so complex. How could I possibly know the complexity of someone else? How can I judge someone else? So I've been just fascinated with the process of awakening in general, and how we can create a prison out of our own mind, or we can be incarcerated and put in a prison. And without people willing to walk into these prisons and not knowing what you're going to find every day, and bear witness to what I think are horrific stories. I also have an elder in Philadelphia who is a pen pal to several high security prisoners. And she has this beautiful ability to bear witness to their stories and send them support and love. And they're very creative beings. And I just feel inspired by people who are doing this work, and I want to somehow get involved in this type of work, because I think forgiveness, reconciliation, compassion for the human condition on a communal scale, on a collective scale, is so needed in our world today. In a way, we've kind of imprisoned our earth. We've imprisoned each other, and we've imprisoned our earth. So the Buddha's teaching can help us let go and move into a space of connecting, of really connecting through the heart, not just through our breath, but each other's hearts. And there's so much pain that needs to be reconciled with, I suppose, is the good word, reconciliation. And thank you, Rami, for creating this, and thank you all for being here. I got to interview with Michel at the Dana Sangha in France a few years ago, and I all but begged, and I almost begged to go into the prison with him, but he said it was very complex, and it takes quite a while to be able to get into prisons, to be of service, to reach out. And I'm in that same predicament right now. And Michel works tirelessly. If I can speak on his behalf, he's not here anymore, but he works tirelessly, and would come back in the 2 weeks that we spent with him and his partner. He would just come back exhausted. He would exhaust his whole being for these prisoners, and I was very touched by that.
So this is Michel, the other Michel. You know, some of you may know that I'm very involved in the Order of Disorder, which is.
Can you say a bit about that?
Yeah, it's embarrassing, but the Order of Disorder is when Bernie thought that that some of us in the Zen world were taking ourselves too seriously, and so he brought about clown noses and other methods of lightening up the space. Yeah. So and I found my way into that. We were on a trip to Japan, Bernie and a group of people, teachers mostly, going to temples in our lineage, retracing the steps that he had taken with my teacher, Peter Matheson, and which was documented in Nine-Headed Dragon River, the book that Peter wrote about it. But in any case, during that trip, my tendency to be a wise ass landed me as the coordinator of the Order of Disorder. So, but so I have humor as part of my practice, as Rami can attest to, and so we laugh a lot when I'm with these young men. We laugh a lot, you know, and laughter is a great way to connect, you know, and also it's curious to them why I would be coming in and doing this work and then laughing a lot with them. But and a lot of, for me, you know, there's certainly an aspect of it which is getting into the prison, and that can be complicated. There's security issues and all those kinds of things, but I've been lucky because they kind of leave me alone, the prison. And so I'm able to go in and, you know, we're in a locked room together, but a group of 12 to 20 young men and myself, and holding that space is hard, you know. They're young men. I often tell them, like, you know, you would have had to lock me up to get me to meditate when I was 18. So, you know, I don't expect everything to be, you know, exactly like it is at the Zendo. But I'll tell one funny story. One day, one of the guys said, he said, "Did you say you were a Buddhist priest?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, shit." And I said, "Well, what's the matter?" And he said, "Well, I'm actually in here for robbing a Buddhist temple." And I said, "Well, that's called karma. Now you have to listen to me." And he did, you know, he actually enjoyed it. And I do think that one of the things is that when I go in, I spend a lot of time listening to them, and I allow them space to talk honestly, but also just bullshit about their, you know, some of the stuff that they're just doing their back and forth stuff, and that's okay, because in it, you know, as in all of our conversation, a lot is revealed. And so, you know, a lot of the times we'll find entry into something deeper there, but sometimes not. Sometimes we just talk about, you know, and then our practice, you know, we'll sit and usually for like 5 to 10 minute periods, depending on how long they can hold it. One of the practices, I've done some training through MBS, the mindfulness-based stress reduction. It's called MBSR, and there's a project out on the West Coast where they do a lot of prison work. So I've done some training through them, and also through Fleet Mall's prison mindfulness program. But the groups that I work with are transient. The group can change from week to week because a lot of these guys are waiting to be sentenced and go upstate. So, you know, I'm not able to develop a program where we spend 5 weeks on a topic or something. Really, every week is a different topic, but one that needs to be whole and complete, you know. And we'll just talk about really practical things. I have to say that I think that I get so much out of it, you know. Partly as a teacher, as a Dharma teacher, what I get out of it is I have to communicate about Dharma without using Buddhist phrases. We're talking about life, you know. We're not talking about the Four Noble Truths, I mean, we will talk about those things, suffering and how we cause and might end suffering, you know. But that has been really a wonderful, wonderful thing for me. And the other thing I get out of it is just the connection with these guys who, as many of you have pointed out, you know, for them, they may have lost some of the connection. That's one of the big things that they're losing when they go in there, to their communities, to safe spaces to talk and share. And so trying to offer that to them, and to show them that they actually have that safe space to talk amongst each other, even when I'm not there, hopefully, you know. So, yeah.
Thanks, Michelle.
Mm.
I want to check in for a moment with Matthew, if you'd like to even just give us a bit of a weather report, where you're at, listening to all of us old folks talk about our life. What are you seeing? What are you feeling?
Yeah. Thank you for that. I'm feeling encouraged, actually, to start to think about what I can do as well, because I can hear these amazing heart stories of the humanizing of folks who have been dehumanized in many cases by a system. In tying up our freedom, you know, when we're in the free world outside of prison, with their place within prison, and seeing that, you know, the prison of the mind is something that we share in suffering. And so it's really, I think I'm just mostly feeling touched by the stories I'm hearing, and encouraged to maybe find something in my own area, which I have to think a lot and do more research around, you know, what are the logistics, because it sounds like logistics are very important in all of this. So I know almost none of that from my local area, but I feel really encouraged to take practice into that space in prison, and to bring humor, to be open, and how much I myself get out of being able to share with others some amount of Dharma knowledge that I've had the opportunity to receive over the past, well, three or so years that I've been practicing. And what a way to practice, I think, out in the world. And perhaps also, I think what I was hearing from Michelle just now is not necessarily even focusing on the terminology per se of, like, do you have all the right words of what does this mean? Which tenet, which sutra? But are we just human beings, and we're dealing with suffering, and that's no matter who we are. So I think that's where I am right now.
Thank you, Matthew. I'm glad you're finding this inspiring or helpful on your path. In a way, this is one of the purposes of these calls, is really just to realize that so many of us have these experiences, and we can elevate one another just by sharing. I'm thinking of the experiences that I've had. I've never volunteered in a prison. I volunteered in hospices and hospitals. And it's not the same, but there's a bit of sense of this isolation. And I remember for me, actually, the joy piece was a bit of a. It's one of the stories I have in my toolkit of when not to be joyful. But I was. I think it was early on in my practice, and I was very excited, and to do this wonderful work because I felt it was so rewarding. And I went in with this very joyful heart into a hospice room where there was this old man and this younger man next to him, and the old man was in the bed. And I was just generally feeling very joyful, and I was just trying to elevate the conversation and asking the young man about the older man, how long has your dad been sick, or been here. I didn't say sick, but how long has your dad been here? And they didn't really relate. They were looking at me very funny, and I kind of took the notice, I took the hint, and I kindly excused myself out of the room. And then I went to check on their file, because one of the things as volunteers that we didn't check on the files before going, because we really wanted to go with not knowing. And when I checked the file, I realized that the person who was sick in the bed was an HIV patient who was the same age as the young man. He was his lover. And he just looked very old. And in my in my attempt to be joyous, I have probably made a feeling of isolation, probably even more isolated. So I think I have a lot to learn from Michelle and from the people of the disorder of how to skillfully do that. I really need that. And I'm thinking the insult that I remember feeling when I was in Auschwitz, bringing this other piece of the work that we're doing in the concentration camp, where my great-grandparents were. And remember the insult of feeling joy there. How dare you feel joy there? And I'm thinking of how deeply needed that feeling of joy, of even the people who perished there. Now, with me there, how much I wanted to feel joy there, and how much that is important. So I'm thinking about this sense of empathy and being seen that Yo-Yo was talking about earlier. And I think Tim mentioned that also, and how that work of bearing witness is a vehicle for trust and for empathy, and also bringing that joy that both Michelle spoke about, appreciating. You bring that element into it. So we probably have a few minutes for a few other, maybe a couple of more shares. I think Tim and Georgia, you kind of spoke a little earlier, and Susan as well. Just want to check in with Georgia. Would you like to say anything, or I saw Susan's hand?
Yes. For me, really, this human connection was so important. And honestly speaking, I didn't go in with any practice, because at that time I didn't follow the Zen practice, but it was really based on the human contact. And yeah, for me that was so essential, and the neediness as well for the prisoners to be in touch with a person from outside, that at least they get some contact through me with the outside world, because they were stuck by themselves in their little community day by day, and working and talking, and but someone coming in and sharing what's happening in the outside world. And for me, it was really, I felt that was a privilege for me to share this and the news and what's happening in my town and what's going on and gigs and things and really this human aspect, this connection that stays with me. It's like a jewel, really, to form a bond with someone, and yeah, and that I wanted to share with you.
Thank you, Georgia. Susan?
Oh, did you unmute me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, Georgia. Yes. The connection, even when sharing something sorrowful, when it's connecting, there's joy in that as well. And so a theme that I sort of really see in the youth prison, I think it's true of teens in general. They have a very hard time feeling okay about feeling happy and joyful, but it's especially true of incarcerated youth, I think. And we did laughing yoga. We always had a yoga break. So one time we did laughing yoga. I don't know if you've ever done this, but if you haven't, I can't more highly recommend it. But for a moment, you know, and it's so ridiculous, so absurd that you just can't help laughing, you know. And we had a high school drama teacher as one of our volunteers, and so she was perfect. She said, whatever you do, this is not funny. This is very serious. Of course, and everybody's cracking up. And it was just, for a moment, everybody was just laughing, and there was just a kid laughing, and it's that humanizing effect of, you know, I'm more than just a prisoner. Or as Brian Stevenson would say, I'm more than the worst thing that I've ever done. You know, so I really appreciate that. And I appreciate the people, whatever we can do to facilitate people feeling like, hey, you know, I've done some bad stuff, and also I've had, you know, really traumatic history, which a lot of these kids have. Horrible stuff happen to them. You know, it's okay to be happy and joyful. It's okay to feel good about myself and talk about my strengths.
Amen. Thank you. So I'm seeing, just being aware of the time and want to be considerate of everybody's commitment to be here for those 90 minutes, and I don't want to go over that. I'm very grateful for everybody's finding the time and making the connection. One of these purposes for these calls is really just growing these connections. And as you will see these calls coming every month, even if they're not necessarily in your field of interest, or maybe you don't have necessarily a lot of experience there, just come and meet others. And if you do have experience, I hope you feel open to reach out to one another over the membership platform. You can find each other and whatever ways of contact each of you offers, whether it's phone or emails. So that's available to you. So I'm just invoking gratitude as we're closing this call, sending it to Colorado and Germany, Florida, and Emilio, I keep forgetting.
Wisconsin,
right,
and
right. Baltimore, right, and Long Island, and moving that gratitude into a sense of appreciation of the privilege of freedom, of relative freedom, of absolute freedom that we have, of choice that most of us have to a pretty large degree, of how we use our energy and time, dedication, and May our practice of growing in bonds and in empathy benefit more and more of those who may be without this privilege or maybe with more privilege than us. Let us share it, and like Bernie said, you know, you got to make a meal and then you got to share it. You got to serve it. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. I'm going to unmute everyone so you can just say goodbye. And again, thank you for being part of this experiment, this international friendship. So thank you all.
Yeah,
So nice to see you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.
Blessing.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.